My name is Eliza Matthews. I'm 32. Last weekend, I bought my father a Mercedes S-Class and packed a sealed envelope into my purse that confirmed I wasn't his biological daughter. I didn't plan on confronting him, not really. But when you've spent your whole life craving one man's approval, sometimes the truth catches fire in your chest, and silence becomes unbearable. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on the fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. I grew up in a town that looked like it was made for stock photos. Perfect lawns, golden retrievers, ivy climbing up colonial homes. My family? Richard Matthews, patriarch and Boston real estate mogul. Caroline, my mom, quiet, elegant, always manicured like the dinnerware. James, older brother, golden boy, wore confidence like cologne. Sophia, my younger sister, peacemaker, observer, born with a sixth sense for tension. And me, always trying. You know how some houses hold secrets in the walls? Ours held them at the dinner table. Smiles stretched over bruised silence. Praise reserved for guests, not kids. Success, Dad would say, swirling a glass of scotch, is earned, not gifted. Except what he really meant was, earn it my way or not at all. I learned early that everything was conditional. A compliment for James's soccer goal. A nod of approval for Sophia's tact. But when I placed second in statewide math finals at 16, he said, try debating. Math nerds don't get leadership roles. Still, I kept chasing. I got a full ride to Cornell, not his alma mater. So that was a strike. I moved to New York, worked unpaid internships, survived on black coffee and ambition. When I finally got hired at Goldman Sachs, he said, let's see if you last a month. 8 years later, I'd made senior investment strategist, the youngest in firm history. So I did something irrational. I spent nearly a year's salary on a car, a glossy black Mercedes S-Class with every premium feature. It wasn't just a gift, it was a bet. That maybe, just maybe, this time he'd look at me and say, I'm proud. The reunion was set for Saturday, Matthew's family weekend, always the last one in June. That meant Sunday was Father's Day, his unofficial coronation. I had the car delivered to a dealership nearby, so I could present it in person. But the real weight wasn't in the key fob. It was in the envelope tucked into my purse, a DNA test I hadn't meant to open. I'd sent it off after noticing weird anomalies from a recreational ancestry kit. Just curiosity, I told myself. Until it said, paternity not established with Richard Matthews. I'd snuck a sample from his hairbrush months ago, quietly, carefully, and it came back cold, scientific, final. I told myself I'd never show it to him, that I was bigger than that. But the longer I stared at that envelope, the more I wondered, had he known all along? Was that why I was never enough? I arrived the day before the reunion, a plan timed down to the minute. My mother would be at her garden club. James and Sophia wouldn't show until Sunday. It would be just us, me, my father, and the car. He opened the door with that same look he always wore, like he was about to correct my tie before a job interview I didn't ask for. Polished khakis, no smile. You're early, he said, glancing at his watch like I'd breached protocol. Dinner's tomorrow. I know, I replied, and my voice caught somewhere between nervous and rehearsed. But I brought your Father's Day gift and wanted to give it to you privately. I handed him the box. His brow furrowed. He lifted the lid and stared at the Mercedes logo. A beat passed, then another. Is this a joke? No, come see. I nudged him toward the driveway. There it was, sleek and gleaming, like a black mirror reflecting every ounce of my hope. He stood in silence, then walked toward it with a slow, studied pace. He circled the car like he was appraising a property, pausing at the grill, then the rims. The AMG package. Bit flashy. I remembered you said you liked it. At the club last fall, you mentioned your friends. He nodded slightly but didn't look at me. It's excessive, Eliza. What are you trying to prove? Nothing. I lied. I got promoted. Big raise. I just thought... But the words evaporated. He opened the driver's side door and slid in. I stood by the hedges watching him adjust the seat, touch the leather. His face, somewhere between impressed and calculating. Steering feels loose, he said after a lap around the block. These new models always sacrifice handling for luxury. He parked it in the garage, tucked it away, out of view. No hug, no thank you, just, well, you must be doing pretty well to waste this kind of money. Like every compliment was a balloon he popped before it left my hand. That night at my hotel, I called Taylor. She'd heard it all before. Every skipped acknowledgement, every minimization of success. You know what, she said, return the damn car. He doesn't deserve it. I'm not doing it for him, I said, half believing it. It's symbolic. Symbolic of what? Setting fire to your bank account for a man who wouldn't notice if you disappeared tomorrow? I just thought... I paused. Maybe this time it'd be different. Taylor was silent for a moment, then, just promise me one thing. Don't show him the test, not unless you're ready for nuclear fallout. I promised. But I didn't remove the envelope from my purse, because some part of me, buried under decades of dismissal, still wanted to be seen, still wanted the lie broken. Not just for revenge, but for release. You ever try to force a moment to mean something? Like drag significance out of someone who spent years proving they'll never give it? That was me, parked at a hotel window, watching street lights flicker across the Mercedes key on the table. It sparkled like a crown I'd placed on the wrong head. Sunday arrived with weather so perfect it felt mocking. Blue sky, soft breeze, birds chirping like a Hallmark movie intro. The kind of day that begged to be remembered for joy, not collapse. I drove slowly to the estate, rehearsing my answers to the usual questions. Still single? When are you moving back to Boston? Wait, you work in finance? Is that like crypto? The long tree-lined driveway was already flanked by parked luxury cars, BMWs, Audis, a Tesla that practically screamed Cambridge tech startup. My Mercedes was parked front and center, no longer hidden in the garage. He'd moved it, displayed it like a prize bull at a country auction. I parked far from the main circle. It felt safer, like walking into a battlefield from the back, not the front lines. The door opened before I could knock. My mother pulled me in, whispered, "You look stunning," then quickly added, "Your father's outside with the Petersons. Be gracious, okay?" The foyer buzzed with relatives and family friends, which in Matthews speak meant business associates, who earned seats at the dining table. Air kisses, shoulder claps, smiles that didn't reach eyes. My cousin Rachel called me Wall Street's youngest queen. Someone else joked, "Did you bring a date or just a new hedge fund?" I caught sight of him through the bay windows, my father, holding court on the lawn, gesturing to the Mercedes. I watched him open the doors, point out the leather, the stitching, the dash display, selling it like it was his own success. His voice was animated, posture proud. That should have been me. He didn't see me watching, but Sophia did. She appeared at my elbow, wine already in hand, looking too put together for 2 p.m. He's done 3 tours, all morning. The Petersons, the Langstons, the Wu Group. Apparently, he upgraded for the holiday. Word is the car's a symbol of generational wealth. I laughed. One sharp, bitter exhale. Generational wealth. That's rich. He didn't mention it was a gift. Not once. Of course not. A gift suggests vulnerability, that he didn't earn it. And in his world, love, especially from a daughter, is just a crack in the armor. Inside, I floated. Nodded at questions, deflected inquiries, gave sanitized updates. Yes, New York is good. No wedding yet. I'm just really focused on work. I felt like a museum exhibit. Tidy, behind glass, fascinating from a distance. Everyone admired the Mercedes, not the person who gave it. James arrived fashionably late, wife and kids in tow, to a paternal embrace I hadn't seen in years. Dad, the car's unreal. When did you decide to trade up? He asked. Sometimes you need to treat yourself, Dad replied, hand on James's shoulder, eyes twinkling. Not a word about me. Not a glance. Just that line, treat yourself. Sophia leaned closer. Liz, this isn't your failure. He's rewriting the story to fit his narrative. You know that, right? I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Because I had a secret version of the story in my purse. 3 pages long, certified by a lab. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to feel like the wrong person had been holding the pen all these years. After a parade of appetizers and obligatory small talk with second cousins who couldn't remember where I lived, I slipped away to the dining room for a refill. The bar was quiet, just me, the clink of ice, and the low hum of central air. I needed space, just a moment to breathe before the main event. That's when I heard it. Voices from Father's study. The door wasn't fully closed, just slightly ajar like a bad habit. His voice carried, always did. Deep, composed, honed from years of boardroom monologues. The car? Yes, quite the upgrade. When you build something from nothing like I have, it's earned. The response came from Walter Peterson, old family friend and Dad's longtime business frenemy. Your daughter mentioned it was a gift. Eliza, right? Said she was promoted? Sounds like she's really made a name for herself in New York. Silence. Then Dad's voice again, lower, laced with dismissive amusement. Eliza's always been desperate for attention. Her career, built on the opportunities I gave her. Private schools, elite colleges, discipline. She finally learned to apply the principles I taught her. That car was her way of saying she's figured it out. I couldn't move. My fingers gripped the glass so hard the condensation left a crescent dent in my skin. My breath turned shallow. He wasn't just erasing the gift. He was erasing me. Turning my entire adult life, every overnight Excel marathon, every tear cried into cheap takeout, every promotion I earned with no handouts into a tribute to his legacy. I backed away before they noticed me, slid past the arched hallway and back into the noise of the foyer, heart racing, fury thick in my throat. When I passed the antique mirror hanging beside the grand staircase, I caught a glimpse of myself. Perfect dress, flawless makeup, fragile as hell. This was the game he played. He would take anything good I did and twist it into evidence that he had done something right, not because he believed it, but because he couldn't stomach the idea that I might have built something without him. I headed to the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled the envelope from my purse. It felt heavier now. Not just a secret, not just proof, a counter-narrative. You ever hold truth in your hands and still feel like it's not enough? I could confront him, expose him. I could shout it in the dining room, burn his reputation to ash with one piece of paper. But some twisted voice in me still asked, would that even matter? Maybe he'd just find a new way to spin it. Maybe he already knew. And maybe that was the real reason he never looked me in the eyes longer than a few seconds. Why my victories were never victories. Why every good job came with an asterisk. Back in the hallway, I caught sight of James approaching, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded, numb. He led me toward a corner near one of Mother's orchid displays and leaned in. Dad says you've been asking Mom some weird questions about her college years. What are you looking for? His tone wasn't concern, it was warning. And suddenly, I realized he was protecting something too. Dinner was served with a kind of precision usually reserved for state banquets. Gleaming silverware, bone china, handwritten name cards that somehow always reflected the pecking order with surgical accuracy. I was seated halfway down the long mahogany table between Cousin Rachel's husband, who once called me Erica the entire night, and a junior associate from Dad's firm who looked about 12. James and Sophia naturally flanked my father at the head. Mom sat at the other end, technically his equal, but so far removed it felt symbolic. I barely touched the seared scallops. When the main course arrived, some kind of meticulously crafted beef Wellington, Dad rose with his brandy glass. It was his tradition. Every year he gave a speech, spotlighted each child's contribution to the Matthews legacy. Even as a teenager, I dreaded these speeches more than any exam. They were where you learned your rank in the family narrative. He started with James, of course. James, your redevelopment of the Riverside Corridor? Bold, visionary, exactly the kind of forward-thinking risk this family stands for. James gave a modest nod, soaking in the applause like it was aftershave. Then, he turned to Sophia. And Sophia, your grace, your commitment to community service, your devotion as a mother, you remind us all that true strength doesn't always wear a suit and tie. She smiled, soft and unsure. Then, he looked down the table. My stomach coiled. I don't think I even breathed. The rest of what he said blurred. Something about superficial success, chasing validation, titles that look impressive on paper but mean nothing without loyalty to the family structure. He never said my name. He didn't have to. The target was clear as day. Mom's face had gone ghost pale. Sophia looked like she might cry. Even James winced, if only because of the optics. I just sat there, hands folded, heart pounding in my ears. I wasn't a person anymore. I was an example. I felt every eye flick toward me, then away. Some pitying me, others pretending they hadn't heard, the same way they always had. It was the family's oldest rule. Don't challenge Richard. He raised his glass again. To the Matthews family, may we continue to grow through honor, tradition, and clarity. Glasses clinked. I didn't raise mine. Because suddenly, I understood something I'd never let myself say before. This wasn't just unkindness. This wasn't about discipline. This was punishment. A sentence handed down for something I didn't choose. The ache I carried my whole life, it had never been about not being good enough. It had always been about never being his. And the proof of that truth, the thing that could blow a hole straight through this curated dinner party, was still burning a hole in my purse. I didn't plan to stand, but my body moved before my mind could catch up. I rose from my chair like a slow tide, calm and steady. The chatter dimmed. Forks paused midair. Someone coughed. I didn't raise my champagne glass. I didn't even glance at it. "Thank you, Father," I said, voice even, crisp. That was illuminating. His eyes met mine, cold, calculating, not surprised. I've spent 32 years trying to hit a moving target, trying to figure out what would finally earn your approval. Turns out, the problem wasn't the aim, it was the game. People were turning now, some looking uncomfortable, others intrigued. The way people look when something messy is happening in a room they can't leave. I graduated top of my class, built a career from scratch, paid my dues, sacrificed steep, and clawed my way up a ladder you dismissed as glorified gambling. And still, here I am, your punch mine. He opened his mouth, maybe to deflect, maybe to sneer. I didn't let him. But here's the thing, Dad. I reached into my purse. This game we've been playing, it was rigged from the start. The envelope slid across the linen tablecloth like a dropped guillotine. Heads turned as it landed dead center between the caviar spoons and crystal water goblets. My fingers didn't even tremble. That, I said, is a paternity test. Certified, verified, you're not my biological father. A silence descended so thick it sucked the air from the room. Sophia gasped. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered. James stood up halfway, then sat down again like someone yanked his puppet strings. I didn't move. For decades, I thought it was me. I thought I was defective. Cold shoulders, withheld praise, public humiliation. I convinced myself I hadn't earned better. I met his eyes directly. But it wasn't me, was it? You knew. You always knew. His face had gone rigid, blank. His mouth parted, but no sound came. Just a twitch in his jaw. Anger or fear, I couldn't tell. I've twisted myself into someone I barely recognize, trying to be worthy of a name that never truly belonged to me. That ends now. And then I reached into my purse again, pulled out the spare Mercedes key fob, held it up like a peace treaty I was tearing in half. I bought that car, not because you needed it, but because I was still delusional enough to think love could be earned, that maybe I could buy the kind of fatherhood everyone else got for free. Gasps now, not just from family, but guests. The Petersons, the Langstons, faces turning red, people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I was wrong. I pocketed the key and stepped away from the table, heels clicking like gunshots in the silence. Past the antique buffet, past the oil painting of my father hung near the entrance like a self-commissioned tribute. In the foyer, I heard chairs scrape, voices rising in confusion and alarm. I didn't stop. Outside, the evening air hit me like water breaking over stone. Cool, clean, final. The Mercedes stood there like a monument. I unlocked it with a chirp, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. German precision hummed to life beneath me. In the rearview mirror, I saw him, standing in the doorway, holding the envelope. For once, his mask cracked, and I drove away.
I checked into a boutique hotel in downtown Boston, the kind with dim hallways, incense in the lobby, and silence that wrapped around you like a weighted blanket. I handed over my credit card with hands still warm from the steering wheel, still shaking slightly from adrenaline. Room 706, 7th floor. A view of the harbor if I pressed my cheek to the window just right. The first call came before I even got my shoes off. Sophia. I let it go to voicemail. Then came James. Then Mom again. Then James again, this time flagged urgent. I turned off the sound but kept the screen lit, watching each new name flash like flare signals from a battlefield I just escaped. At one point, I sat cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through texts with a strange detachment, like I was reading someone else's disaster. Sophia. What was in the envelope? Was that real? Are you okay? Please, call me. Liz. Dad is shouting. Mom's locked in their room. James is threatening legal stuff. Everyone's freaking out. Please, just tell me you're safe. James. If you don't return the car by tomorrow, I'll consider it theft. Also, what the hell was that performance tonight? Grow up. Mom. Voicemail 1. Eliza, sweetheart, please come home. We can talk about this privately. Voicemail 3. There must be some mistake. He raised you. That has to count for something. Voicemail 5. He's pacing the study. I've never seen him like this. Eliza, this family, this situation, please don't escalate it further. It all felt surreal. Like I'd pulled the pin and tossed the grenade, and now everyone was calling to ask why the house was on fire. I took a hot shower, scalding, until the fog on the mirror matched the fog in my head. Afterward, wrapped in the hotel's thick robe, I sat by the window with a glass of room service Chardonnay and watched tiny lights flicker across the water. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel destroyed. I felt emptied out. Exhausted, but clearer than I'd felt in years. For the first time, no one could twist the narrative. The truth had detonated in a room full of witnesses. There was no walking it back. No carefully reworded family email from James. No tight-lipped apology from Mom that danced around real accountability. No more emotionally weaponized silence from Dad. And me? I was still whole. Still standing. Still breathing. Sometime around midnight, a new number lit up my screen. A Massachusetts area code I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. A text came through a moment later. From private number. I never meant for you to find out that way. It wasn't an affair. I had someone before your father. His name was Thomas Keller. We were in college. It ended before Richard and I started dating. When I found out I was pregnant, Richard offered to raise you as his own. He tried. But some men can't separate blood from love. I was wrong to pretend it wouldn't matter. Can we meet tomorrow? Just us? There's more you deserve to know. It was from Mom. I reread the message 3 times, each line ringing like a church bell in my chest. Thomas Keller, MIT, before Richard. There it was. An origin story I'd never been told, delivered in 160 characters. And suddenly the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was pregnant with possibility.
We met the next morning in a cafe neither of us had been to before. Neutral ground. Far from the estate, far from the country clubs and boutique grocers and people who knew our last name. She was already seated when I arrived, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea like it was the only thing holding her together. No makeup, no pearls, just Carolyn, the woman, not the Matthews matriarch. "You look tired," I said, gently, sliding into the booth. She smiled, brittle. "I am." The silence between us stretched. Not tense, just loaded. Then she exhaled and began without prompting, as if the words had been waiting at the back of her throat for decades. His name was Thomas Keller. We met junior year at Wellesley. Well, I was at Wellesley. He was at MIT. He was studying mechanical engineering. He built radios from scratch, loved jazz, wore these ridiculous corduroy jackets with suede elbows. I thought he was brilliant. My parents thought he was... She hesitated. Inconvenient. I didn't interrupt. Just listened. They hated him. Thought he'd distract me from making a good match. And by good, I mean rich, connected, white picket perfect. I didn't care at first, but when I got pregnant, I panicked. My throat closed, but I stayed quiet. I never told Thomas, never gave him the chance. I just disappeared. My parents pulled strings, and then came Richard. Now she looked directly at me, eyes older than I remembered. He offered to fix it, said he'd raise the child as his own, said it wouldn't matter. But it did, I said, my voice hoarse. She nodded. It did. We both sat in that truth for a while. The teacups steaming, the clatter of silverware and espresso machines fading into the background. I thought he could love you the same. I really did. But the moment he saw you, your eyes, your questions, the way you never accepted things at face value, he shut down. I blinked fast, tried to keep the heat behind my eyes from spilling out. Why didn't you tell me? All those years of him dismissing me, cutting me down, you just let it happen. Her face crumpled, not dramatically, just real. Because I was afraid of the consequences, of losing the family, of tearing everything apart. And because you were strong. You always seemed so strong, like you didn't need protecting. I shook my head, and for the first time in my adult life, I let it crack. I did. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. I know, and I'm sorry. I failed you. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Anger and grief battled in my chest, but under it all, a strange, aching relief bloomed. At least now I knew. Not just the truth of my origin, but the truth of why nothing I did was ever enough. Why I was always dancing in front of a man who refused to clap. It had never been about performance. It had always been about proximity to his ego, his bloodline, his legacy. And I was outside the circle from the start. I finished my coffee slowly. She watched me, waiting, maybe hoping I'd tell her it was okay. I didn't, but I stayed. And maybe that was the beginning of something honest.
A week after the dinner, a certified letter arrived at my Manhattan apartment. Formal font, cold language. Legalese dressed up as civility. RE, return of vehicle, Mercedes-Benz S-Class. My father, through his attorney, demanded I return the car immediately. He used the word misappropriated, which made it sound like I'd broken into his garage and hotwired it. 2 paragraphs later, a thinly veiled threat. Failure to comply will result in further legal action regarding defamatory claims made at a private family gathering. Right. Because scientific truth was now defamation. I didn't respond personally, my attorney did, with a calm, clipped letter stating that the car was a legally purchased gift. The DNA test was a verified lab result. Facts, by definition, can't be defamatory. Meanwhile, a second letter arrived. This one, soft, human, digital. From Thomas Keller. Subject, your message. Dear Eliza, I'm still in shock, and I had no idea. To learn I may have a daughter, one who's clearly built a remarkable life, leaves me overwhelmed and, honestly, full of questions I can barely articulate. I'll be in New York for a tech conference in 2 weeks. If you'd be open to meeting, no expectations, I'd love to talk over coffee. I want to hear your story, and if it's not too late, maybe be a part of it. Thomas. It was quiet, measured. Exactly what I needed after decades of being spoken at. I cried reading it, not because it was poetic, but because it was kind. At the same time, I started therapy, weekly sessions, 7 a.m. on Wednesdays, with a woman named Maya who asked questions like, when did you first learn love had conditions? In the beginning, I didn't have answers, just exhaustion. Trauma tangled in achievement. We spent the first few weeks unpacking my resume, not for accomplishments, but for pain, embedded in milestones. That Cornell scholarship, fueled by desperation to be noticed. My first bonus, spent on gifts, not security. The Mercedes, a literal purchase of perceived value. Do you realize, Maya asked once, that almost everything you've built was to prove you belong in a narrative that was never written for you? Yes. And it shattered me. But knowing is power, and power can be reclaimed. I returned the Mercedes voluntarily, delivered it to his estate myself. No note, no confrontation, just dropped the key in their brass mailbox and drove off in a rented Camry with cracked leather seats and zero pretension.
James sent a 2-word text hours later. Wise move. I didn't reply. But Sophia called nearly every day. She became my tether to something soft amid the wreckage. We talked about Mom, about therapy, about her kids, about how the Matthews legacy was a suit of armor she never wanted her sons to wear. You know, she said once, he's still trying to spin it, telling people you forged the test, that you had some emotional breakdown. I didn't even flinch. That kind of manipulation used to gut me. Now, it just sounded sad. Because the truth, my truth, was louder than his version. And for the first time in my life, I had no desire to be let back in.
Thanksgiving came, and with it, an invitation. Not to the estate, but to Sophia's home, a modest brownstone in Cambridge. Warm. Lived in. The opposite of our parents' marble museum. "I'd love for you to come," she said. "Mom will be there, Dad won't." I paused before answering. The old Eliza, the one who rearranged her schedule, her heart, her worthiness for Richard's approval, would have waited for a family-wide consensus before showing up. Not anymore. "Yeah," I said. "I'll be there." That afternoon was healing. No spotlight speeches, no hierarchies. Just kids laughing, turkey carving, and my mom, quiet, humble, more present than I'd ever seen her, helping Sophia mash potatoes while humming something off-key. After dinner, as dishes clinked and wine glasses emptied, she pulled me aside. "I meant what I texted," she said. "I'm sorry I waited so long to tell you. I didn't know how to be a mother outside the Matthews frame. But I see you now." Tears welled, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not the girl at the end of the table anymore." She nodded. "You never were. I just couldn't let myself see it." The next week, I met Thomas Keller. We chose a quiet cafe near Central Park, neutral, like the first conversation with my mother, only warmer. When he walked in, I saw pieces of myself mirrored back. The tilt of his head, the way his eyes scanned the room. He smiled the second he saw me, unsure but genuine. "Eliza," he said softly, like the name was a gift he'd just unwrapped. We didn't pretend to be instant family. There was too much distance. But there was honesty, interest, curiosity instead of expectation. "You look like your mother," he said halfway through our second coffee. "But your intensity, that's all mine." I laughed for the first time in days, real, belly deep. It felt like breathing again after months underwater. We talked about books, about jazz, about markets. He asked about my work and didn't once imply it was unstable or performative, just listened. We left with no promises, just an agreement to talk again. And it was enough. In the months that followed, I reclaimed parts of myself I didn't even know I'd lost. I started sleeping without checking my phone first thing in the morning for messages that would determine my emotional weather. I stopped trying to narrate my life in a way that would make Richard proud. I focused on what made me proud. Therapy helped. So did therapy breaks. Long walks with Sophia, random dinners with Taylor, and solitary nights with jazz and candlelight, and zero performance. And eventually, I looked in the mirror and saw not the girl begging to be chosen, but the woman who had chosen herself. I haven't seen Richard since that dinner. His silence used to feel like exile. Now it's peace. Because family isn't who names you, it's who sees you. And I'm finally seen. Have you ever had to break away from someone just to find yourself again? Maybe your real family turned out to be someone you found along the way. Maybe you, too, have rewritten a story you were handed at birth. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that your worth isn't measured by someone else's approval, please hit that like button, subscribe for more journeys of reclamation and quiet rebellion, and share this with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone. Because sometimes the bravest thing we'll ever do is walk away.